Hello, and welcome to the Designing with Love podcast. I am your host, Jackie Pellegrin, where my goal is to bring you information, tips, and tricks as an instructional designer. Hello, instructional designers and educators. Welcome to episode 84 of the Designing with Love podcast. Today's guest is James Gilchrist, founder and director of Lighthouse L&D Consulting. James came to learning and leadership after careers in the arts, first as an actor, and then a musician, where he learned the craft of presence and connection. About 25 years ago, he landed a role as a training manager and found another calling, helping others grow. Since then, he has partnered across industries to build programs that remove roadblocks, align teams, and put people first. James also collaborates with L&D organizations like iSpring Solutions and the Learning Guild to support instructional designers and leaders worldwide. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It's a delight to be here.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that we connected through iSpring Learning Exchange. It's been a wonderful community, and I've really enjoyed every part of it. So this is great.
Well, that's music to my ears.
Yes, and I'm sure everybody that listens that's on iSpring or Learning Guild will appreciate that. So I love that. Great. So to start, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what inspired you to focus on designing compassionate, human-centric learning programs and performance-based learning solutions?
Sure, Jackie. So I've told my origin story a few times and had conversations with people about whether or not my path into L&D was deliberate or by accident. I think you hear people talk about that.
Yes.
And I definitely will say my path into L&D was not a straight line. I actually started out as an actor, as you said, and I've been a musician most of my life. I continue to perform, and I think that it surprised me early on to discover how much of the skills and experiences that I had in both of those roles were transferable into L&D. The importance of presence in business, for example, the importance of connection, and the understanding of and the ability to create a compelling narrative, storytelling. Those were all skills that ended up being very transferable both to learning and development and later to leadership development. It was about 25 years ago that I stepped into a training manager role. And I remember discovering almost immediately, first I was surprised to find myself in it. And then shortly thereafter, I discovered how much I loved it. And since that time, what has kept me engaged, because I'm a creative person. Before the show, we were talking about being creatives, and I know for me, a lot of what that entails is I'm always looking to what's next. I'm always looking for what's new and different and how to keep things fresh. And it wasn't the tools or even the content that kept me engaged. It was people, those light bulb moments. And I know you have a global audience, so I'll just say, the phrase, you saw the light bulb go on. Well, it refers to that moment when you're talking to someone or you're teaching someone or just experiencing something with someone, and you can suddenly see on their face, oh, I get it. It goes from being information to something that they've internalized, and they can immediately start thinking how that will apply to all different areas of their work or their life and that sort of thing. So it's those light bulb moments, like a light bulb has gone on over their head, that have kept me going, and realizing that when leaders showed up with compassion and authenticity, their teams thrived. And that insight shifted the way I approach my work. I'm not thinking in terms of just designing programs anymore. I'm trying always to create conditions where people can bring their best selves to the table.
That's amazing. I love that. And I love that light bulb moment that you brought up, because it made me think of a light bulb moment I had. It wasn't necessarily when I was an instructional designer, but it was before I became one. And I think you and I might have talked about this in the moment that I realized that this was the field I wanted to get into. And it was when I was working in higher education in an institution and they introduced their instructional design program. And when I looked at the email in my inbox and started looking at all the courses, and I just one after the other, as I went down the list, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I love it. So that was my light bulb moment. And I was just like, this is great. This is what I want to do. And then halfway into the master's program, when I got my certificate, that's when they had an opening in the L&D department. I was like, wow, but they had a trainer position open too. And I was like, that sounds interesting. But I went back to the ID one, and that's the one I ended up getting. So yeah, when you have those light bulb moments, it's amazing. It transforms everything in your life, right? So that's great. Yeah, I hope everybody has those at some point or another, because they're great when you do have them. Yeah, that's wonderful. And so you talked a little bit about this. So over your career, you've worked on a wide range of learning programs and leadership initiatives as well. What's been some of the biggest challenges you faced in designing these programs, and how have you overcome them?
So my LinkedIn profile right now says up at the top, people first, tools second. And I bring that up because that was kind of a transformative realization for me, because I had spent a lot of time in my career as an instructional designer, and then a learning experience architect, and then a team leader, focused on the solutions, creating solutions, and thereby and the tools used to create them. So for me, tools were really the big, that was what mattered. And I was excited about tools and learning new technologies and educating my teams about those technologies and encouraging people to lean into those technologies. You're getting a sense of the theme here.
Right. Yeah.
But over time, and even though I have had several initiatives in my past that I was really proud of, how we solved them using tools, I came to realize that the hardest challenges aren't about building the learning itself. They're about the environment that the learning lives in. I've seen programs falter not because the design was wrong, but because of conflicting priorities and siloed communication, or leadership treating that training like it was a quick fix. So an example, I once built a program that on paper checked every instructional design box, but the organization hadn't aligned their priorities, so participants were constantly being pulled in different directions. It wasn't until we paused and said, okay, what are the competing initiatives here, and how do we reconcile them, that the program started to work. And that taught me that sometimes the most important part of our job is helping stakeholders surface and solve organizational challenges before we ever launch a course.
Absolutely. Right. And that brings to mind the importance of needs assessment, right? That we should not skip that needs assessment, because that tells you right away, is it an organizational issue or is it a training issue? And I teach this to my students all the time. Please do not skip that process in your projects. Please do not do that, because then you get all the way to, if you're using ADDIE, as your basic framework, and then you get all the way to implementation, and then you go, oops, that's a big oops. Yeah.
Wouldn't you say also that a great lesson for anyone in instructional design is learning that having those frameworks, having those processes, having those mechanisms with which you engage other humans, your stakeholders, your business owners, your team members, that they're extremely valuable. And without them, many times you're not quite sure where you would start, but they by themselves are not the solution. You can follow them to the letter and still discover that they did not accomplish what they were intended to accomplish. And sometimes that happens because what you weren't aware of came up to bite you. And it wasn't something you thought was relevant. It wasn't even something you thought to look at. So what I like to say is use those tools, follow a process, be consistent, but never forget that everything is happening in a human environment. And 9 times out of 10, there's more than one group of people or more than one business or more than one competing priority that is simultaneously going on behind the scenes. And you cannot simply bury your head in the sand and think that if you just focus laser sharp on this problem or this project, that you'll be safe, for lack of a better word.
Right. Oh, so true.
I find myself asking in the past and in the present, depending on what I'm doing, but I have found myself asking many questions during those processes that you just named that people were surprised by. And it's because they didn't have anything to do with the project parameters. They didn't have anything to do with the learner needs, but they had more to do with what is the environment that all this is supposed to happen in, and what do you project the company will look like at the time that this gets launched? And what else is going on in your life, Joe? You've come to us, you've told us there's this problem to solve, and all our conversations have been focused on this, but just give me a heads up. What else is going on for you? Because how many times have you been engaged full steam ahead in a project that literally just ends in the middle before it's ever seen the light of day?
Right.
Because resources got reallocated or the need that was identified just went away because this other thing developed much faster than anyone anticipated. These are the things that as a team manager and as a director of learning, you need to make yourself and your team aware of. Because, like I said, most roadblocks aren't technical, they're human. The
Right.
good news is that human problems are always solvable. It's just the mistake to forget that everything we're doing is happening in a human environment.
Hello, I have some exciting news to share with all of my listeners. There is a feature called Fan Mail. What this allows you to do is send me a text message anytime during the episode. There's a link located at the top of the description in each episode, and it says send Jackie a text message. So when you click on that link, you'll be able to send me a message letting me know what you thought about the episode and if you have any ideas for future episode content as well. I look forward to seeing your text messages. Thank you. That's so true, right? Yeah, and that makes me think of what I do every day with working on higher education curriculum, and we work with a variety of people. Like you mentioned, you have the stakeholders, we have people at the college, then we have the subject matter experts, which are usually the faculty that have that subject area expertise, right? And then we have all the people in my department, and we don't work at the same company. They work at the institution, and then curriculum design development, we work for the educational partner part of it. So a little bit different, but we have that partnership together. So we work in conjunction with that. So we meet the needs of the university, and sometimes new subject matter experts, or even people that are new to the college, they don't understand the process, and you have to explain it to them and say, here's what we're trying to do. And it's not us as a department trying to stifle your creativity. No, we're trying to make sure that things are the best for the learner, for the students, because we don't want it to be a hodgepodge of different things and then they don't know where to go or what to do. So we're doing it in their best interest to make sure that in the program and each course that they take in that program is a progression, right? And just like with training, we want to make sure if they're doing a training program that it's the best, that training program has that progression and that sequence. So we always give them, ultimately it's up to them. If they want to put something in the course that we know is not going to work, I'm going to let them know, here's my take on it, and here's how you can improve it from an instructional design perspective. But if they say no to what I'm saying, I'm okay. Yeah, test it out and see how it goes. If it goes well, great. But if I was wrong, I'll be the first to admit I was wrong. But if they come back later and say the failure rate was horrible and and all this stuff, then I'm like, well, maybe we should revisit that, right? And see, how they do. But yeah, it's interesting because you would think faculty would understand that, right, James? That they would understand that process, or even those that do the training, that they would understand that, but they don't always understand what it takes to make good training and good curriculum. So it's very interesting. Like I saw an assignment yesterday that I reviewed, and one of the subject matter experts, you'll appreciate this, had made changes to the assignment, and the curriculum developer had me look at the changes and said, how does this look? And 3 out of the 5 prompts had multiple things within the prompt, all muddled together in a sentence. So it said, well, first of all, it said in one prompt, it said, identify and apply this thing. And I was like, wait a minute, if they can identify, they can apply, because identify is a lower order thinking skills and apply is higher order thinking skills. So you're asking them to do two things in one. So yeah. And then one had 3 different things in one prompt. So I was like, break it up into 3. You're asking them to do 3 different things. So yeah, we tend to want to dump everything. Have you noticed that they want to just dump it all on the learner at once?
Oh, that question is one of my top 5 all-time questions that I find myself having with subject matter experts. The question goes something like, so of all of this information, what would you say is the most important? And of course, the first answer is always everything. There's no prioritization. There's no awareness that even like lower and higher levels of thinking, that some of the information implies, or some of the training implies previous knowledge or previous ability to apply the knowledge. So you spend a lot of time refining the answer. In the question why is a question that every instructional designer should get very comfortable asking, and asking more than once, and often asking more than once about the same question. In other words, ask someone for the answer to a question, and then ask them again and get them to further refine and explain and expound on what they are telling you. Because only then do you fully understand the origin of their objection. Most of the time, it's an objection, right? If it wasn't an objection or an obstacle, you wouldn't be focused on it because you wouldn't need to work around it, right? But someone says no, or someone says yes to everything, anything that doesn't allow you to further refine your solution for the actual needs of the end user or learner, begs further investigation.
That's so true. Absolutely. Yeah. And that brings up kind of the next question about that authenticity, right? How we need to be authentic in the work we do. So kind of this was one of the questions that you wanted me to bring up. And I think it was so good. So I added this. So kind of that turning point. So how did authenticity become a strategy for you, not just a value in what you do every day in your position?
Well, I think that authenticity, as you would describe it in a leader, can be identified a lot of different ways. But they all tie in one way or to another to performance. They all tie to performance. So, for example, if you are a leader and you are new or nervous about how to be more authentic, and what that even means, and what kind of effect you can expect it to have on your team, I recommend thinking of 3 C's. You're creating opportunities, you're clearing obstacles, and you're communicating transparently. And then maybe the fourth C is with compassion, right? I discovered that giving a simple framework to leaders was helpful. And what do we mean by create opportunities? Well, you look for ways to define desired outcomes for your team or for an employee, and then you give room to own them, meaning less prescriptive, less performative, and more conceptual. Where are we going with this? And allow someone to bring themselves into the room, if you will. So creating opportunities is one way to immediately get on the same page with a team or someone, a direct report. And second, the act of clearing obstacles. We hear a lot in leadership about how leading isn't something you do when it relates to people so much as it is being out in front of the people that are working, coming along behind you. And it's your job to look out like a scout in a military operation. Whoever's way out in front has a chance to see where the enemy may lie, where the hidden chasms may be revealed, or where a large opposing force may be approaching from. What direction are they approaching from?
Right.
So, and if you want to bring it back to, a team environment and a business environment, you simply, if you're not sure what the obstacles are, meaning sometimes it's very difficult for leaders to look ahead because they are so focused on managing those that they lead. They're so focused on the tasks that everyone is being asked to perform that they're kind of looking backwards. It's like a marching band conductor. Like everyone else is going forward, but the leader is actually looking backwards and waving the baton and, not so clear on where they're about to go, but very keen on making sure everyone stays in time,
Right.
So if you're not sure, meaning if you don't feel like you have all the right easy to spot opportunities for looking ahead, the simplest thing to do is ask your team, the people who are doing the work. You go to them and you say, what's in your way?
Right.
Find out what obstacles are they already counting, or what obstacles are they already encountering? And if it's something you can control, well, then get it out of the way. Figure out how you can remove that obstacle. And as soon as you say it that way, the implication is clear and the impact is clear. I mean, if you've got a team of 5 people and they all have one obstacle or another, and you are actively pushing them aside, everyone speeds up. So how much faster is your organization able to perform and your team able to produce? And how much quicker will you understand what obstacles are likely to show up tomorrow, right? Because it's our understanding of the obstacles we've cleared today that are sort of the tip of the hat, they're the clue, if you will, as to what you should probably keep looking out for.
I love that.
Third, you want to communicate transparently. I was actually on a webinar with Matt Jertson about leadership today, and the question came up from someone in the audience about how to communicate transparently, because there are so many times in a business environment where you feel like you are being given prescriptive instructions of what you can say and what you can't say, what you can share, what you can't share, that sort of thing. But providing context, outlining constraints, and talking about the decisions in process with your team in plain language can go miles towards eliminating the kind of stuckness.
I like that.
The stuckness that the team is feeling because they don't have a clear sense of what is going on? Like that's the question you
Right.
hear when things start to feel stuck is what is going on? That's what you hear most. So you need to figure out how to answer that.
Right. Absolutely.
So communicating with transparency and eliminating obstacles and creating opportunities. Every leader will have a slightly different approach. They will all be in a slightly different place in their management journey. One leader I coached was micromanaging from a good place. Quality was important. The reputation, net promoters, all of that mattered. But micromanaging wasn't actually getting the results she wanted. So we replaced task by task check-ins with a weekly blockers only conversation and a shared definition of what done was. Like when is something done? And simply shifting to that sort of leadership style and that sort of like opportunity creating, right? You're removing blocks, but you're also encouraging the employee to sort of step into the I'm going to solve the problem mode, right? You're giving them some agency.
Right. Right.
Agency is implied when micromanaging goes away. There's this lovely sort of self-empowerment that comes into the picture because, frankly, it's a mistake to think of people as leaders and followers. It's a mistake to think of anyone in an organization as anything other than a member of the largest team. Because at every level, individually, we are all emboldened and have passion about success at that which has been laid out for us or we have decided is what success looks like. Everyone is, in fact, motivated to move in the right direction. The problem is when we worry too much about whether or not people will move, right? It's that needing to crack the whip, if you will.
Yeah.
But when you allow, and when, in this case, they changed this mode of interaction to one where a short conversation where basically it became clear that it was for the leader. It wasn't so that the employee could report and satisfy the leader, the manager. It was so the manager understood what they needed to be getting out of the employee's way. There were so many little problems that would otherwise have become long conversations in this micromanagement situation that just disappeared. They were dealt with or they never materialized. Just things started moving more quickly. Within 2 months, the team was delivering solutions faster and they were reporting higher levels of trust. The work didn't change, but the leadership did.
Right.
And
so it
I
shifted
know it's
things.
important to you for your listeners to have takeaways. So I'll say, if you're listening to this and you're trying to figure out, well, how can I apply this in my work? It doesn't matter if you're in a titled leadership position or you're simply working and collaborating with someone else at your level. You ask simply your team or your colleague, what would make this go 10% faster? It doesn't need to be the thing that's going to cause the earth to spin, twice in one day. Figure out what the biggest obstacle is within a week and then tell them how you are working on eliminating it or how you have already eliminated it, but sort of divide and conquer, but focusing on those obstacles. So those are some of the things that I think of when I think about how you take the idea of authentic leadership and you apply it practically. Another example is something I mentioned earlier because you brought up the process by which a project develops. I said that most performance gaps aren't technical, they're human.
Right.
There are 3 repeatable patterns that I have seen over and over again. Conflicting initiatives that are fighting for attention, siloed communication that hides dependencies, and top-down mindsets that remove agency. It's easy to blame tools or staff or other resource limits because they're visible. But most of the time, culture is more at the heart of the constraints. But if leaders align priorities, if they open the flow of information and they return decisions to the right level, performance can improve without adding a single new platform or element or tool.
That's amazing. I agree with you on that, because I think if the culture of the team or the department, or even at the higher level, right, organization as a whole, if their culture is strong and like you said, there's that transparency and trust there, and employees are getting what they need at the time they need it, and they're not, like you said, they're not getting ambiguous information or directions, right, but it's clear as to what they need, they're going to be successful. And then it goes all the way up to the organization and they're successful. So yeah, it's a ripple effect. Like they say, that ripple in the pond, right? Just, yeah, that's amazing.
There's a ripple effect. And another idea to bear in mind, if you are trying to bring this to work, bringing this to your environment, is steady. Okay. You're talking about a pattern of small, reliable behaviors over time. When people experience a leader as consistent and responsive, that's when trust can grow. And with it, your influence. Because I am at no point saying that there aren't times when, because of a pivot, some change in direction, some new order coming down from the top of the organization, that the leader has been brought in to understand, and now it's their task to rally the troops, if you will, that you aren't going to find yourself speaking to a room of people whose arms are crossed, whose ankles are crossed, whose faces are closed, and they are like, tell me why, tell me why I should go along with this idea.
Right.
I wasn't consulted,
yeah.
So
exactly.
You can't think of any of these things as a magic bullet. Like, they're not something you can just drop in to an environment and expect the resolution to happen immediately. So just like when we talk about someone, I was giving a talk in New York last month on this topic of authenticity. And someone said, how do you know what you should be measuring? We were talking about ROI. We were talking about how L&D demonstrates ROI within an organization. And so, of course, the idea of measurements and how they tie back to the business came up. And the question was, how do we know what to measure? And my answer was very similar to this answer, in which I'm saying, start by, in the case of measuring everything. Just start measuring now, because until you have collected enough data to support a sense of what direction you're going in, you can't clearly identify how a learning solution or a program change is moving you in a different direction, right? If you have no place of origin, you have no data to say where you started from, right? And that's always the problem, is like when you talk about adding in measurements, you're like, well, we can't really show or demonstrate that this is making a difference because we weren't measuring stuff before we took this approach. Well, the same kind of logic applies to this approach of adding authenticity. It's that it's not a quick fix. It's not something you can just start doing and expect that human beings are going to go along for the ride right away. You have to start it yesterday, and you have to start it in all these small, repeatable ways so that you can change the culture. You can modify your team's attitudes. You can get everyone going in the same direction. That's the only chance you'll have when you find yourself at an influx or an impasse where there's some critical leadership situation happening, that you can expect people to fall in and lean in and help go in the direction you want to go, right? Sometimes I think a measure of a business success is literally the speed with which they can pivot and start moving in the new direction at full speed. Like, it almost doesn't matter what direction you're headed in, as long as when it becomes necessary, everyone can immediately about face and start going off in the other direction as if nothing happened, right? That's how you stay ahead of your competition. That's how you stay ahead from a thought leadership standpoint. Anyway, long answer to that question.
That's okay. No, that's great. That makes me think of like we talked about technology earlier, and that's, at least in my department, that's one of the things that is harder for individuals in my department and even some people on my team, that it's just harder for us to get that technology change over. So if there's a new system that comes into place or there's an upgrade, it's really hard. And then if they don't have, you're right, if they don't have the support, if you don't have that buy-in early on, they're going to struggle with it, and they're going to be resistant to that switchover and that change when it does go live, or when they say, "Oh, we're going to transition from the old to the new software, but you'll have time, so you can still use the old." Well, people will use the old software as long as as long as they're able to, until they're forced
to the line.
Yes.
To the line. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mentioned Matt Jertson's webinar today. Something else that came up in that conversation was my idea, that teams should be shown that what is being measured is the team's outcome. The mindset for the team should be a focus on the team. In other words, how is the team operating? How effectively is the team operating? Rather than a focus on a project and its current state or the state it needs to get to, or a vision, right? Because those latter two things are subject to change. And it's because you've given everyone the idea that what's really important is the project or the look of the software or the stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, or that it's aligned with the vision. Like, if everyone is focused on those things, those attitudes breed attachment. It's a natural human condition. You've told people that that's what's important. So when you suddenly suggest that it needs to change, there's going to be resistance. There's going to be resistance because people don't just let go. They can't go from being fully invested in an idea to letting go of it and acting like it doesn't matter, right? But the reality is that's what's happening in our current environment. Change was always the constant, but now rapid change and rapid changes of direction and rapid changes in development is the constant. Like that, the only thing you can count on from this point forward is that things will continue to change faster. The landscape will look different faster. So if you can get a team or a company focused on themselves and how they are working together, then it doesn't matter what they're working on. It doesn't matter what changes. It doesn't matter if something in the environment changes, because they're still together. They're still the team. They're the ones who are going to get it done. You see what I'm saying? There's an aspect to that is so, I don't know. I say it and people seem surprised that would be a direction I would recommend or an approach I would recommend. But I've seen it work extremely well, and I think it's also one of the reasons why that people are surprised by it is because we have for so long been measuring performance, human performance, on a productivity, on an efficiency, on a output level, like a machine. Right? The numbers are easy. Humans are hard. So we just overlay humans with the numbers and hope it works. And the reality is there's nothing more efficient. There's nothing more productive. There's nothing more forward thinking than a team that is allied with itself. right?
Right, right. Absolutely. Right. And that kind of makes me think of the importance of teams being agile, right? That agility is so important, being adaptable. The brain, just kind of makes me think of that SAM model, one of the models that we use quite often, that iterative process and being agile. So I think agility is so important these days because, like you said, we're in the fast lane when it comes to different things. So yeah, especially with technology, right? And keeping up with that. So my students remind me of that every day. They're like, yeah, did you see this tool? And I'm like, no, I haven't seen this tool before. Oh yeah, it does all. And I'm like, wow, okay, I'll check this out. This is great. I love it. Wow. Yeah, that's exciting. Definitely. So as we wrap up, what are your top tips or advice for listeners who are looking to transition into instructional design or maybe are new to the field? We even talked a lot about leadership. So maybe if you want to touch on the leadership aspect, maybe they're already in the field and they have a leadership opportunity right at their doorstep.
Well, for our instructional designers, whether they're new to the field or they're transitioning into the field, my advice is to build 3 muscles early. Your understanding and use of the needs analysis, as you mentioned, the importance of stakeholder alignment, and that touches very much on what I was saying earlier about understanding the context, the business environment in which this solution is being developed, and iteration, which goes back to what we were saying just now about being able to pivot and make changes and go in a different direction. Don't feel like you have to be perfect out of the gate. Be curious, ask good questions, meaning questions that you don't know the answers to, and questions that you're not even sure where they might lead. Okay. But questions that sort of unpack more than anyone expects. Another thing, just sort of an adjunct to that, is if you're put in charge of a project and someone tells you, a manager or business director, someone of import, tells you who's going to be in the meeting, where everything that's going to happen from that point forward will be decided. Don't be afraid to speak up and suggest people that are not invited to the meeting, especially if there are people who have some actual touch point to the end process or the development of a tool that you know is going to be used. I like to think of it as I like to have more people in the room that are closer to the ground than I have leadership. And that's because leadership has been talking about what is going to be happening in this meeting for weeks. They know, they think, what everything that needs to be said and what there is to learn. And they're thinking of it as an opportunity to just dump the information on you. They expect you to have a giant bucket that you can capture it all and go away with it and synthesize it and know what to do. Like, that's always going to be the approach. And it's up to you to realize that just because they've been talking about it for weeks and thinking that this is going to be a one-way dissemination of information, your job is to push in the other direction, to ask the questions, as I said, and invite comments from those people who are closest to what will eventually be the end solution, right? Because they are the ones who know about some of those hidden obstacles. They are the ones that know about things that no one is going to bother to tell you because they didn't think it was important. So that's sort of a long tangent, but I just want to say, give yourself agency, give yourself permission to invite other people to meetings. I mean, this might be the only time you ever get all these people in a room. So you're the one whose butt is on the line more than anyone else. Because if you're in charge of this initiative, this learning solution, and it goes sideways or costs more money, no one else is going to be looking back at that meeting and saying, well, I neglected to give them the information they obviously needed. No, they're going to say, what didn't you do? What didn't you ask? Why didn't you assume this? Why didn't you predict this? right?
Right.
So the only way you can be in a position to be a defensible position in that instance is if you give yourself the authority that no one else is going to just volunteer. So, and then finally, let your designs evolve with feedback. It's really important to be creative. It's really important to be someone who always has some idea of what something could look like, but don't get married to any of your ideas too soon. Best to never get married to them at all. Just get married to the outcome. Get married to what it is that you want to have happen, what behavior you want to see changed, and stay married to that. And don't worry, your grandchild of a learning solution that you're so proud of using all the latest technology and tools, et cetera, and oh, by the way, it happens to be blue. Like, you can't get attached to that. You can't feel compelled to hold on to that if the need arises for that to be green, for example, right? If it has to completely change its look and feel, that has to be something you're okay with. You have to pivot fast. But remember, you are not an order taker. Think of yourself as a partner in performance. If someone comes to you and says, I need a course, your job isn't just to deliver it. It's to ask, what will people be able to do differently when this works? That one question shifts you from being a content provider to being a trusted partner.
Love that.
And that shift, I think, is where the real joy and impact of this field comes from. I mean, you might like the tools, you might like building stuff, but trust me, that alone will not sustain you in perpetuity. You need to find joy and satisfaction from the process. It's like it's like enjoy the journey, right? It's like
right.
In no other field is the importance of understanding how to enjoy the journey important to survival and also to gaining respect. I mean, we are taught early on that the goal of what defines success in business is sort of moving up the ladder. That is true in every field. If you want to move up your learning and development ladder, you will need to establish more than an effective track record at creating solutions. You will need to establish positive rapport and have earned respect from those around you in the business, especially those who are not in learning and development. The day a business director that has nothing directly to do with learning and development, but with whom you've worked in the past, says to you, we think of you as part of our team, that's when you know you've reached that level of parity that will allow you the freedom that will ultimately take you to whatever your version of success looks like. So always be looking for ways to strengthen that, establish that.
Right.
We're architects of possibility.
Oh,
think of yourself that way.
Ooh, I love that phrase, architects of possibility. That's great. I love that because you want to be able to expand your reach, right? And enact that positive change in more people. So yeah, I love that. That's wonderful. Thanks for all that advice, James. And I appreciate that you shared your insights today, especially around instructional design and leadership, because those all go hand in hand, right? And what we do in the L&D profession. Absolutely. So I know your experiences, your tips and expertise are going to inspire my listeners for years to come. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It was my absolute pleasure.
Great. I would love to have you back on the show anytime. I know once somebody comes on once, we're like, let's do this again. So I've done series before. So if you ever want to come back, you're more than welcome to be on the show again.
I would look forward to that. And we can talk about whatever feedback you get on this episode. Maybe you can give us some ideas about where to move, what direction to go in, and what things your learners might be interested in. And if folks outside of this episode want to get in touch with me, the best place to do that is on LinkedIn. I am almost exclusively using LinkedIn to connect with and communicate with the L&D industry at large, and to talk about ideas like leadership, creating engaged online L&D communities, and coaching in any and all respects. So find me on LinkedIn, and I know, Jackie, you're going to have the links to find me there in the podcast notes. But I hope I will get a chance to connect with some of your listeners. That'd be great.
Yes, that'd be great. Yes. I would say since I've joined the iSpring Learning Exchange, I've had so many people connect with me in that space. And so my network has grown tremendously. So I agree with you. LinkedIn it's the premier hub for that, for us as L&D professionals and instructional designers. So it's a great place. It definitely beats all the other platforms hands down when it comes to that. So, it's a trusted place for professionals. So it's great. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. I'll make sure to drop that in the show notes, and then that way everybody can connect with you as well. Great. All right. Well, I hope that you can come back on again soon.
Thank you again, Jackie. And
Appreciate
I hope all your listeners, wherever they are having a great day when they listen to this. And if they're like me, they'll re-listen to the podcast a couple of times.
Yes, exactly. And they'll be able to get the blog like we talked about beforehand, and all those other different elements that will help enrich that experience. So it's exciting. Great. All right. Well, we'll connect again soon on the other side of the mic. Great. Thank you for taking some time to listen to this podcast episode today. Your support means the world to me. If you'd like to help keep the podcast going, you can share it with a friend or colleague, leave a heartfelt review, or offer a monetary contribution. Every act of support, big or small, makes a difference, and I'm truly thankful for you.